Okay, I think we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Opera 101 with Cleveland Opera Theater. I am Stephanie Ruozzo, and I'm kind of a new face around here. I'm an education and outreach associate with Cleveland Opera Theater, and my background is actually as a music historian. So I'm going to be popping in every now and then to talk about some big milestones in opera, some of the big questions and issues that were at stake as opera developed into the art form that we all know and love today. So welcome. Opera 101 is for all ages. We are here to bring opera to everybody, and each day we're going to discuss one aspect of opera to help our listeners understand with and engage the art form. And if you have a question, please do pop it into the comment box at any time. And I admit I'm new to Facebook Live, but I am definitely going to do my best to make sure I'm up on all the comments as they pop live. If not, email it to us at any point, or you can just drop it in the comment box once the video is posted, and we promise to get to it then. So today's question that we're going to be talking about is, what was the first opera? How far back does this art form go? And when exactly were people starting to think about music the way that we think about music today, joining the music and the story together? So I'm going to take us all the way back to 1575, quite a while. And if we go back all those centuries, we see that it was a really transitional time, and there was a proliferation of about 15 different musical genres that kind of all coalesced, and these ideas were all floating around in these musical genres to create opera as we know it. So the first musical genre that we really want to look at, the biggie, is this thing called the madrigal. And really what madrigals were these through composed settings of poetry. In other words, they didn't have a repeating refrain. None of the music repeated itself. It was just a continuous melody from beginning to end. And what we see with that is composers and performers valued these settings of poems for the complexity of what we call polyphony, or how many voices fit together, a bunch of different voices fitting together to create these beautiful harmonies that reflected the feelings of the poem. So basically, the more voices you combined, and the better you knew how to combine all of these voices, the better a composer you were. And around 1575 or so, people started to shift their thinking. And composers started to think, rather than putting a bunch of voices together, we can separate high voices and low voices into two different strata. So we're talking about polarizing bass and treble sounds, so that a human solo voice would stand out over a bass accompaniment, what we call basso continuo, or continuous bass. And this solo voice led to what we call the solo madrigal. And extended solo madrigals could tell whole stories. So now the singer could actually adopt a character. I can sing a solo madrigal as this historical or mythical person that was in the culture and that everybody already knew about. And this recitation of stories became known as monody. Now, the one type of story that these monodies were really used to tell a lot of was the pastoral drama. In other words, like things about like nymphs and shepherds wandering around in the fields and all these mythical ancient creatures. And the reason that this was so great for monody was because these mythical creatures and shepherds became a great excuse for music. There was this, cultural trope that shepherds sing. Don't ask me why, but apparently shepherds were very musical, and so were nymphs, and so were all of these like satyrs and things that would like float around in the pastoral atmosphere. So when we recited these pastoral monodies, music was a completely plausible way to tell the story because these were musical creatures. And also around 1575, we see these groups of people coalescing, mainly in Florence. Florence was the hotspot for this. And these Florentine, what we call academies, these groups of people, were really concerned with Greek drama. So if you ever look at your Renaissance histories, and historians talk about The Renaissance being famous for looking to classical models, looking to models of ancient Greece and Rome, and trying to figure out how to recapture those ancient art forms. Well, these Florentine academies made that their mission. They were concerned mostly with Greek drama. So how do we stage these ancient Greek plays properly, the way that Aristotle and Aeschylus would have wanted us to? And the main Florentine academy, like the big boys who were innovating, were La Camerata. And this group was led by an Italian nobleman named Count Giovanni de' Bardi. And his best buddy and right-hand man was Vincenzo Galilei, father of the Galilei that we all know and love. So musicians, be thankful to Vincenzo. He was the really important guy for us. And these guys in La Camerata believed that music was necessary to achieve the catharsis that Aristotle talked about. You couldn't have the emotional response to drama without the drama being recited to music. And the poet associated with La Camerata, who really wanted to put these things into practice, was a poet named Ottavio Rinuccini. He was a librettist for some of the first poems that got turned into these dramas, such as Daphne from 1598 and Eurydice from 1600, or as the Italians would have called it, Eurydice. But the point being, we come down to this flashpoint moment in the Medici wedding of 1589. So in that year, Christina of Lorraine married Ferdinando I of the Medicis. So Ferdinando wanted to host these big lavish events, because the bigger the event you hosted and the more lavish and spectacular it was, obviously the more power your family had and the more the people in your city loved you and the more stable you were as a ruler. So for the wedding, they staged this big spectacle called La Pellegrina, and they billed it as an intermedio. So it wasn't called opera yet. This thing was a series of madrigals, those poems that we talked about, solo madrigals where one person would get up and recite while they had accompaniment beneath them, sinfonias, which are totally instrumental orchestral passages, so there were no singers during the sinfonias, and dances. So they would actually like act out ballets. And all of these genres were put together into one spectacular entertainment they called an intermedi. And that was La Pellegrina. So that could be the first opera, if we want to look at it that way. The first time music was telling these stories. The other flashpoint that we want to look at is Eurydice or Eurydice from 1600. It's the first published opera. Like, we still know what this score looks like. We still have this. And we can still look at the notes that were on the page. And this Eurydice, remember that Ottavio Rinuccini, the poet I was talking about? So this is his poem in 1600 being set to music by a guy named Giulio Caccini. And Giulio Caccini had made a name for himself in, you guessed it, the madrigal genre. So he was a madrigal composer who decided to bring forth this long-scale, large-scale work, this entire drama in 1600. And what Caccini gave us with Eurydice was this idea of what the Italians called recitando, or reciting singing, recitation singing. Or what we now call recitative. So this is basically poetry whose affect, whose emotional impact, whose message was heightened by intoning it to a melody. And what you could do was have this poem be so much more dramatic, have it have so much more meaning, because it was combined with song. And that recitar cantando, or recitative, is a landmark in opera. So we could also call Eurydice from 1600 the first opera. The last flashpoint I want to talk about is Orfeo from 1607. And this was a work premiered during Carnival season in Mantua at the ducal court of Francesco Gonzaga. So it was during a huge celebratory season. Again, these noblemen are commissioning works to show everybody how cultured and powerful they are. And here's why you should honor me, because, like, obviously I'm cool enough to stage these huge spectacles for your entertainment. And the music for this entertainment, for Orfeo or Orpheus, was by Claudio Monteverdi, another madrigal composer. Now, why Orpheus? We already talked about Eurydice being the subject of these dramas, Orpheus too. Well, Orpheus was the original rock star. His whole myth surrounded the idea that music can charm people. His whole story was plausible to be told in music because he was the original music star. So that's why Claudio Monteverdi sets this Orfeo or Orpheus myth to music. And Monteverdi, around this time, gets into some really huge fights with a music theorist and minor composer named Giovanni Maria Artusi. Now, Artusi wanted to follow long-established rules for polyphony, those putting of voices together, so that composers would handle dissonances or unpleasant sounds in a delicate way that wouldn't offend listeners. And Claudio Monteverdi said, well, forget that. Let the words be mistress of the music. In other words, if the poetry describes something ugly, if it describes something painful, like sadness, the music should sound ugly or painful to express the words. So he didn't want to handle dissonances in a polite way. He wanted to handle them in a really emotionally impactful way. And the theorists in this debate, and especially Monteverdi himself, was calling this new idea the seconda pratica, second practice, or stile moderno, modern style, against the prima pratica, first practice, or stile antico of Artusi. And this debate was fierce. It was huge. And the idea of words being the mistress of music rocked the musical world. But that's what gave us opera as we know it today. And that's why we get to experience this great art form. And that's why we get to see this combination of words and music that we love so much. So I just want to ask any questions out there. If you do, please drop them out. Please put them in the comment box now, or if you want to email them to us, please do that. In that case, check out our Opera 101 event tomorrow at the exact same time and place, and we will see you there. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.